We are live. Asad, we can't hear you, sorry.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world, to the participants for this conference as well as the panel. Today's panel that I'm moderating is the Government and Businesses Digital Transformation Challenges and Opportunities. The panel members today are Tina Jabeen, the CEO from Startup Bangladesh, Jayne Chan, Head of StartmeupHK at InvestHK, Renata Ramalhosa, the Director of Beta I Brazil, and Dr. Ricardo Greenfield, Managing Director for EurA. Is that correct? EurA AG.
Managing Director for EurA Portugal. I'm a branch manager for the group and Managing Director for Portugal, just so I don't get into trouble with the bosses.
Thank you for pronouncing that for me. I'm Asad Sultan. I'm the moderator for this panel. I'm the CEO of Deutsche Malayan Ventures in Kuala Lumpur. My company, DMV, is actively involved in the 4IR transformation agenda for Malaysia as well as Southeast Asia for its penetration and inclusion. I'll start by introducing the panel members one by one, after which I will ask each panel member to present a keynote address of sorts, which talks about their own platform and how it contributes to the discussion topic, after which we can have a session of Q&A for 15 minutes or so. I would request the panel members when they begin their presentations to keep it within 10 minutes or so that everyone has a chance to present, and then we can have some questions and answers based on the discussion. So to start with, Tina Jabeen currently serves as the Senior Policy Advisor to the ICT Ministry of the Government of Bangladesh. Tina brings 25 plus years of Silicon Valley experience in collaborating on complex projects across multiple shareholder groups. In 2016, Tina led the ICT Ministry's establishment and launch of Startup Bangladesh, a venture fund to support the country's fledgling startup sector. Since 2016, Tina has assisted the ministry in policy and investment initiatives with other governments and private industries across Asia, North America, and Europe. Tina's network of access includes numerous foreign government agencies as well as private companies in technology, banking, healthcare, private equity, venture capital, and accelerators. As senior advisor, she promotes ICT's entrepreneurship and startup ecosystem initiatives at prestigious international forums such as the World Economic Forum in Davos and the UN Capital Development Fund. Tina was appointed as the first managing director and chief executive officer of Startup Bangladesh. With this inaugural appointment, the ICT division recognizes the opportunity to continue promoting talent and innovation within key sectors that advance Bangladesh's vision for and position within a new global economy. Next is Jayne Chan. Jayne is head of StartmeupHK at InvestHK, the government department responsible for attracting and retaining foreign direct investment into Hong Kong. StartmeupHK is InvestHK's startup division established in 2014, aimed at attracting innovative startups, investors, and other stakeholders to Hong Kong, providing a one-stop service platform to support these companies setting up in the city and promoting Hong Kong as a premier startup destination and helping build the ecosystem to transform the city into a global hub for innovation and entrepreneurship. Prior to joining InvestHK, Jayne was executive director at TIE, a global, sorry, I got another call there, a global nonprofit network focused on fostering entrepreneurship. The StartmeupHK Festival is one of the key platforms organized by the team to attract international startup communities to Hong Kong, to share and network with local innovators, corporates, and showcase the city's success stories. The annual event in July 2020 attracted over 180,000 attendees and 470 speakers from almost 100 countries. Next on our panel is Renata Ramalhosa. Renata is the CEO and co-founder of Beta Brazil, Latin America, since July 2019. Beta is a global consultancy on collaborative innovation with more than 10 years of experience in corporate innovation. Beta is created to boost entrepreneurship, and its mission is to foster a true innovation culture. Renata helps new and established businesses grow in 6 main areas: acceleration, corporate, innovation and open innovation, education, investment, and hub. Before that, Renata worked for HMG for 18 years. She came to Brazil as part of the UK diplomatic service as British Deputy Consul General in Sao Paulo. She is the recipient of the Honorary Officer of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire by Her Majesty the Queen. Finally, Dr. Ricardo Greenfield. Ricardo has a master's in electrical engineering and a PhD in engineering conducted at the University of Porto and the MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. At EurA, Ricardo is responsible for managing EURA's branch in Brussels and is the managing director of Portugal. He is responsible for developing international projects. Ricardo has advised SMEs in launching new products and services in different areas such as AI, digital health, and manufacturing. In addition, Ricardo is the acting portfolio manager for the consortium for implementing the European Innovation Council's business acceleration services. EurA is a pan-European innovation consultancy headquartered in Germany and active for over 20 years with over 120 consultants in Europe. Thank you. Followed by the discussions, as I mentioned, from the we will have some questions arising from the presentations and relating to the session subject. If any audience member wishes to pose a question, I'm not sure if they can, but usually Zoom has a chat function. They may use the chat function if it's possible to post it. Thank you. We'll start with Tina. Tina, the floor is yours to discuss and introduce Startup Bangladesh.
Thank you so much, Asad. And thank you to the organizer, Cities ABC, and all the partners for inviting me here and also to arrange this fantastic session. I'm looking forward to learn from each of you. And, very good morning, good afternoon, depending on which time frame or time zone you are, to my distinguished panelists. Thank you. So a little bit about Bangladesh before we jump on to Startup Bangladesh. So Bangladesh, as you all know, is one of the fastest growing economy in this region. And in 2008, the Digital Bangladesh dream was conceived by our architect of Digital Bangladesh, the National ICT Advisor to the Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Sajib Wajid Joy. Digital Bangladesh program launched in 2008, and there are 4 pillars, which based on which all the activities, the technological and the infrastructure development, all the activities have been built upon those pillars. So basically, it's digital government, connectivity and infrastructure, human resource development, and the ICT industry promotion. What we targeted to do by 2021, which is going to be the 50th birth anniversary of Bangladesh, our target was to provide vital services delivered via technology. 90% of vital services delivered via technology. We are not there yet, but we have made significant progress. Also, 90% of the citizens would be connected through internet. We have surpassed that. Also 2 million IT and ITES sector employment. That's what we strive to generate by 2021. And it's almost 2021, but we are right now the second largest freelancing country in the world. So that's a big stride. And also we are striving to provide ICT industry revenue, basically generate $5 billion just from the ICT industry. So, it has been a really challenging journey since 2008, but it has been a progressive journey, which is the good news. So from Digital Bangladesh, because, it is about technology and how technology would be used to drive all these different national goals, basically you cannot ignore the startups, right? The huge transformation, disruption that the startups can bring, not in the fast, very highly developed country, but, a country like Bangladesh, where much development still needs to happen. So that was the reason, about 4 years ago, Asad already mentioned, 4 years ago, our Honorable Prime Minister commissioned this project called Startup Bangladesh. It's a campaign, which is under the Digital Bangladesh campaign. And the idea is to promote and foster the startup ecosystem. The ecosystem is actually not that old. It's about 7 to 8 years old. But in the last 4 years, huge development, very robust, lots of good, results. And I'll just share some stats with you because I think, it would be helpful, and, I'm very proud of it. So in the last, let me look at my number. In the last 4 years, especially in the last 3 years, almost $263 million of foreign investment came into Bangladesh to the startup industry. That is not a big number when you compare to the global standard or what's happening globally. But, it is a big number when you are looking at an ecosystem which is still in its infancy, really. So, it's a huge moral boost for the country and for the ecosystem. So what happened also, actually it's not 263, it's about 300 million. And out of that, local funding, funding like, Startup Bangladesh, which is now a venture capital fund. Local funding was just from the government funding, probably about specifically on startups, allocated amount is almost $100 million out of that. So, it's not that bad. The foreign investment, and on top of it, the local money, especially from the government side, that's coming in. We have about 42 accelerators and incubators. There is about 2,500 pretty good sized, decent startups who are at different stages of development. But if you look at the real big ones, probably there is about 50. We all heard about bKash, right? Which is the largest mobile financial services. And bKash played a huge role in the fintech industry. So that's also, a startup. So also we have probably about 250 startups every year starting, and not all of them probably making the finish line, but these are good numbers when you look at a country in an ecosystem which is very new. When I started with the Startup Bangladesh campaign 4 years ago, we had about 273 startups because we did a call for submission, and now in any call for submission, you would get at least 1,000. So there is a huge boost in the system. So the government is doing quite a bit. In addition, the private industry is doing a lot for the startup ecosystem. We just launched the first venture capital fund, IDLC Venture Fund 1, which has been launched by a non-lending financial institution. They do funding for SMEs, and which is a big thing. Because in a industry where capital market is just loans, nothing for the startups. It's a big thing for a big boost for our ecosystem. And with that, we also have a few other venture capital funds which have started, but this is the first one from a bank. Startup Bangladesh Limited. Now let me come back to what we are doing. Startup Bangladesh Limited is the first venture capital fund 100% funded by the government of Bangladesh. It has started with a $55 million of allocated fund. It's going to be provided to us in tranches based on our investment need. And we just started our journey in March of 2020. And right now we are looking into a pipeline, a very, very healthy pipeline of about 250 startups. And we are looking into making some investment in the next 8 months, probably about 25 to 50 startups. Predecessor to Startup Bangladesh Limited was Idea Project, which is what I was very involved with in putting together the investment guideline and the operations procedure together. And that project is just for grants. So, we have provided about 150 grants to 150 startups, $10,000 ticket size. And, that is going to be transition and loop into this VC, where all these startups who are coming through their stages of, seed or growth or whatnot, they're going to be naturally taken into our VC ecosystem. So that's about startup. I'm going to share a little bit data about Bangladesh, the ICT situation, because I think it's important. Bangladesh is the 8th most populous country in the world and growing in about 7 to 8%, 6 to 7% for the last decade. Very young population, and we are expecting 2 million young Bangladeshis are going to reach an annual income of about $5,000 every year over the next decade. And that is going to fit very nicely into Bangladesh's goal to become a developed nation in the next decade. The density dividend, that is also a huge plus, which is the highest in the region. And the internet penetration is reaching about more than 60%. So the country is really in a very advantageous position to support the innovation inspired by our young generation entrepreneurs and the startups. And the areas where, we are seeing a lot of demand with this growing middle class affluent community is, fintech, lifestyle, logistics, enterprise solutions, health tech, agri-tech, edu-tech, e-commerce. And this is also considering the post-COVID market. We are also looking at very, very seriously the changes in the market due to post-COVID and our ICT national policy, our national startup policy, and also the country's short-term, long-term perspective plans are also pulling these factors into each of the developmental goals. And some of the things are basically, the startups are going to be incorporated, taken into every sector of developmental areas of the country. And this is going to be wired into our national policies. So I know that, we have lots of speakers here who are from different countries and very much, very well established and very well reputed, very successful entrepreneurs and whatnot. I would like to hear from all of you. And, I am very happy to collaborate with everyone here and everybody who are listening, and happy to answer questions. Thank you so much, Asad. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Very impressive summary of your activities at Startup Bangladesh. Sounds like you have your hands full over there. I think you're right. It is interesting that this panel has representation from South Asia, yourself, East Asia, Jayne, Cham from StartmeupHK, also from Europe and South America. So it is one of the questions that I intend on asking, which is how the how you can localize from the entire range of opportunities into the, into the stage of your market where it's, the stage of growth that your market has, as well as your geographic kind of footprint that exists that you're serving through your platform. Anyway, we can get to that later. Next, let me introduce Jayne. I believe, Jayne, you have a presentation which I have and I can share for the conference participants. Or if would you like me to do that, or do you want to do it yourself?
If you could, yeah, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much.
Let's bring it up.
And while we're waiting for that, thank you ever so much, all the organisers, for inviting me to speak, and the panellists. Absolutely amazing. It's a real honor to be on this panel with you all. So looking forward to the learnings. I just want to give you a little bit more context about, I suppose, the Hong Kong startup ecosystem. I work for a government department that focuses on inward FDI, and I specifically look after the startup development, the startup sector. And I just want to start off by giving a little bit of context about Hong Kong itself, and then dive a little bit deeper about specifically what's happening in our ecosystem, and what's the, I suppose, distinguishing points compared with maybe some of the other cities and countries that we're talking about here. So if you don't mind, if we can go to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. Thanks, Asad. So I just want to talk a little bit about our fundamentals. When we talk about Hong Kong, I think most people know about Hong Kong somewhere in Asia. Usually, it's part of China, and it is part of China, but it's a special administrative region, which means that, there are different kind of systems that are being run compared to the mainland China. And some of the things that distinguish Hong Kong to other kind of cities is actually listed here. So most people know us as a financial center. We are one of the world's financial centers. If you look at our, the fundraising side of things, look at the kind of throughput in terms of capital that is, that goes through here. We are usually in the top 3-4 kind of jurisdiction for financial activities. Last year, we were the world's #1 in IPO and funds raised. And this is, something that is a regular occurrence. We are very, very strong in initial offerings. And we recently also introduced a weighted voting rights structure, which has actually pushed the impetus a little bit more to the tech companies to enable them to actually list in Hong Kong. So before, it was very much one person, one vote. And now we changed that to a weighted structure similar to what we see across the NASDAQ and some other locations, whereby, we allow the founders, especially of tech companies, usually to actually, even though they own a specific amount of shares in the company, they actually have a lot more kind of influence in terms of the determining the direction of the company. So that is the weighted voting structure. And we also at the same time changed the listing rules to enable pre-revenue biotechs to actually list on our stock exchange as well. And these are massive kind of changes. I mean, it's probably the biggest change we've seen in the stock exchange, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, in the past few decades, actually. And this has really propelled us to a very, very strong position, especially in terms of secondary listing with the large kind of mainland Chinese tech companies listing in Hong Kong. We are a free and open market, so we've got freedom of movement, capital, talent. There's a free port trade regime. There's a free port. We also have a very, very simple tax structure, which was, again, a new kind of rule was introduced probably about 2 years ago to basically reduce an already low amount of 16.5 corporate tax down to 8.25 for the first $2 million worth of profit that is generated here in Hong Kong. We don't have any other kind of tax. We don't have VAT, GST, capital gains, withholding tax on investments, although there is a tax you do have to pay if you're hiring people, and that is very much to do with the pension side of things. We do have an enviable infrastructure here in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong International Airport, for example, has been again and again voted as one of the top airports in the world. It's you know, we fly to 220 destinations, COVID notwithstanding, of course, and we are 5 hours from half the world's population, 3 hours to all of Asia's main city. So we do see that a lot of the companies that come to Hong Kong are coming partly because of the geographic location of where we are as well. And you know, if you're used to doing any kind of business in Asia, you'll know that a lot of things are still preferred being done face to face as well, you know, although, you know, we're learning leaps and bounds into that whole virtual meeting situation. I think a lot of people still prefer that face to face thing, and that's why the geographic location of where we are actually really does matter in a business context. We have an independent judiciary, and we run a common law system which we inherited from the British, and it's slightly different from what's on the mainland China. So even though we are part of mainland China, that's why we call the one country, two systems, because we do have a, you know, a separate judiciary system, and it's also a leading center for dispute resolution as well. We have very strong IP protection. So all of these kind of fundamentals are one of the reasons why Hong Kong is a financial and a business center. Asad, if you don't mind moving into the next slide. So I wanted to delve a little bit more into the startup ecosystem, obviously, because that's the part I look after. And we've actually been tracking the development of the startup ecosystem over the past 6 years. We do a very comprehensive survey, and we've been doing this for many years, just to enable us to have a context of what kind of companies we're seeing in Hong Kong, and therefore what kind of policies and other kind of support we can actually bring and you know, help these companies to grow and expand and hopefully make a real contribution to Hong Kong's economy. So if you look at the table here, the various kind of charts, over the past 6 years, you'll see that we have you know, grown a number of startups up to about just under 3,200. You see that on the top left there. And over the past 6 years, which is effectively how long the startup ecosystem in Hong Kong has been in existence, you know, we've grown substantially to about 200%. And the number of people that has been employed is actually, you know, growing quite substantially as well. But one thing I think that really does help to differentiate Hong Kong versus other kind of startup ecosystems is how international our startup ecosystem really is. So about a third of our founders are from outside of Hong Kong. And we believe it is this, you know, this international sort of like a way of looking at issues or problems and coming up with solutions that are slightly different. And you couple with that with the expertise of people in Hong Kong, with their, you know, market knowledge, with their language abilities, we think collectively they actually make for very, very strong startups. And you'll see the top kind of nationality listed here, with the Americans, mainland Chinese, as well as the Brits, making up the top kind of percentage of international founders here in Hong Kong. Next slide, please. And in terms of the sectors that these startups are actually employed in, you know, no surprises here, I suppose, with fintech actually being our biggest one. And I'll talk a little bit about some of our unicorns here, but we do have quite a lot of fintechs, and this actually we're just in the process of finalizing our survey for this year. And again, the fintech numbers are looking very, very strong. The other areas that are also very strong is on the e-commerce side. The supply chain and the logistics is all related, because we are sitting next door to one of the biggest e-commerce markets in the world, which is of course mainland China. We have a lot of companies leveraging Hong Kong to actually sell to the mainland Chinese market, and vice versa actually. So a lot of the mainland Chinese companies are actually going through Hong Kong, because we are that international business kind of gateway to actually enable them to, you know, develop and expand overseas as well. And you know, it's, even though we've got some very, very strong subsectors, you will see that we have a representation across a lot of different industries. And that also reflects the economy of Hong Kong, because if you actually start looking at a little bit more detail into Hong Kong, our economy is actually incredibly diverse, with trading and business professional services being quite a big part of that. Next slide, please. I mentioned the unicorns in Hong Kong. I think, for a city of 7.4 million people and a relatively nascent startup ecosystem, we've actually done quite well. If you look at unicorn creation, I mean, it's by no means the only measure by which we look at the development of the startup ecosystem, but it's one of those ones, I suppose, that cross borders that people understand. And you'll see here we've got 8 being created over the past 6 years or so. The top 4 are actually fintechs, with 2 in the middle in the logistics kind of sector. And then Klook is actually a travel platform, a digital travel platform. And SenseTime, of course, you may have heard of. They are the world's most highest valued AI startup globally. It was started at a Chinese university in Hong Kong with one of the professors and some of his students. And now it's, I think the company collectively is worth about $20 billion US, and it's being deployed across the board. They've developed facial recognition right down to the chip level, and they've found a lot of resonance in a lot of different countries with their technology. Next slide, please. One of the things that I should mention here, because we are talking to a very, very international kind of audience here, is that they may not know about the Greater Bay Area, or the GBA as we've called it. And what this is actually an initiative set up by, straight direct from the president of, of our central government, to come up with this idea whereby 9 cities in southern China, in conjunction with Hong Kong and Macau, both of which are special administrative regions, to actually collectively develop into this much bigger area, this market, this potential 1 hour kind of living circle, living, working kind of circle. And it's absolutely a fantastic opportunity. It's one of the reasons why a lot of startups are interested in Hong Kong, is to potentially tap into this. I mentioned before that Hong Kong is a market of 7.4 million people. And, that in of itself is great if you're actually looking to potentially test something. But if you're trying to really scale, anyone will tell you that that number is really not big enough to actually make a massive kind of contribution to, I suppose, a startup becoming a global kind of player. With the GBA, this changed the ballgame somewhat. Considering we are talking about just 11 cities within southern China, we're talking about a population of 71 million people, incredibly tech savvy. It's where, Tencent, HTC, Huawei, and a number of other giant mainland Chinese tech companies are headquartered. And as you can probably, seen from Silicon Valley, for example, there was it was all a lot of the development from the 60s and 70s were actually generated by having some tech giants there and having some fantastic universities, and that created a cluster effect, which collectively, grew and spawned other serial entrepreneurs, which then, created this dynamic ecosystem that is envy of the world today. Now, and the GBA, we've got the potential makings of that with these very big giants located there. And that in itself is actually spinning off a lot of, different types of innovation and technology activities. It's also traditionally where a lot of the high value manufacturing took place as well. So you've got, something where like this massive market with, these big tech giants. You've also got this very advanced kind of manufacturing rapid prototype in place, that is Shenzhen. And then you've got Hong Kong, which is like this financial kind of center globally. And then you've got Macau, which in itself is another lifestyle kind of location. Collectively, we think that makes for a very strong proposition for companies interested into tapping into potentially the mainland Chinese kind of market. We've actually going to be dedicating a lot of resources going forward. And you might actually hear some of the news over the next week or so, where, the Premier will be talking more about some of the developments in Shenzhen, and because of this 30-year anniversary, about how they are intending to turn this into an innovation and technology global leader going forward for Shenzhen. So I think, in terms of opportunity, it is a big one.
Hi, Jayne.
Sorry, did I lose you?
There you are.
Yeah, sorry, I've got dodgy internet access here, so I apologize. So I just want to say a few words about what the StartmeUp Hong Kong team does. We're here to basically guide and support, startups, founders, investors, corporate innovation labs, and accelerators, incubators to actually land in the city, and then through the different kind of connections and support here to connect them to other kind of cities overseas as well. And if anyone has got any kind of request or would like more information about Hong Kong with regards to the startup ecosystem, we also have 31 offices around the world as well. So feel free to reach out to Invest Hong Kong in those other locations. And then finally, I just want to go to the next slide and just talk and just mention the fact that we do have the StartmeUp Hong Kong Festival. This is something we've been running for several years now. And, with this virtual event that we created for the first time in July this year, previous events were very much face-to-face, and we had usually about 20, 30,000 people attending. Because of the virtual platform, and I suppose because of the fact that, a lot of the mainland Chinese people can actually tap into the event for the first time this year, we managed to hit an incredible number of, of attendees. And we're really hoping that this is an event that really does add value and is relevant to startups. It's not just another event for the sake of it. And I would invite, my fellow panelists as well as the audience tuning to potentially, look into attending this sometime. Thank you so much, Asad. I'll hand it over.
Thank you, Jayne. That was very, very impressive also. And good luck with the, I think you have a Typhoon 8 descending on Hong Kong. So stay dry and stay safe out there.
Yeah, hence the network issues, actually. So I apologize.
Yeah, no, I'm very impressed that you were able to dial in at all, given that everything's shut in Hong Kong today. So very interesting to hear about that. As you know, I spent most of the last 25 years in and out of Hong Kong, so it's very nice to hear how well Hong Kong has done as a regional hub for startups and digital transformation. So moving on into Brazil now, in the other part of the world, Renata, I will give you the floor to talk a bit about Beta I in Brazil and Latin America and what you're up to there.
Well, thank you very much, Asad. Thank you for the invitation to be part of this digital week. Nice to meet you all, my fellow panelists. Really great to see how globalization works in these kind of forums. I'm going to try and share a presentation, which I hope you can see now. And although I'm based in São Paulo and I'm sort of responsible to expand Beta I in Brazil and in Latin America, I'm going to speak a bit how Beta I was created, because I think it was a very interesting case on how society and projects outside government can actually be crucial in creating ecosystems, and then what has been our journey, not just in Portugal, but in other parts of the world. So Beta I started 10 years ago as a non-profit organization, and it started in Lisbon, in Portugal, during a very difficult and challenging time. You probably remember 2008, 2009, Lehman Brothers, and all the impact that the Southern European countries had, in particular Portugal, Spain, Italy, with a very robust financial and economic crisis. So at that time, Portugal was facing a very depressing time, I have to say. I was there at that time, and the talent was leaving the country. And the founders of Beta I really wanted to make something different to retain that talent and to make sure that throughout that crisis, we could create some sort of ecosystem that will allow a different route for Portugal. So that was what was done. The government was not able to do it because it was very focused in responding to IMF and the European Union, European Commission, and others that were lending money to solve some of the very robust financial problems that Portugal was having at that time. And therefore, it was this group of entrepreneurs that were the founders of Beta I that started to create a number of actions to build what is now a very interesting ecosystem in Europe and also globally recognized. Portugal is a very small country. I mean, as you know, 10 million people. And at that time, and I think the people who are born in Portugal, we are born with a global mind. So we cannot just see Portugal as our country, but we need to see the world. And that was the mentality and the culture that the founders of BETI brought when building this vision of creating an ecosystem. And we started by doing a lot of events, bringing people from Silicon Valley, from Hong Kong, from Africa, from Latin America, to actually share what was their journey in terms of creating an ecosystem. And that was really good to start, creating the first, the first moments where startups and entrepreneurs started to create their own business. Then came the first investors from the United States of America that started to invest in some of these startups that today are unicorns in Portugal, and see some results out of that. And the government was always a bit aside because they were having other problems to solve. And then it was, throughout this journey, where BETI and others, of course, were kind of developing this ecosystem, the government started to see that actually there was time now to create a number of incentives, a number of policies, a number of other means that could reinforce this ecosystem in Portugal. And nowadays you have a package of stuff that is quite attractive. And nowadays, Portugal is actually able to attract talent and attract startups from all over the world to be based in the various hubs that exist here. Oops, sorry, I'm not able to. So nowadays, we are no longer a non-profit. We are a private company. We changed our status. We kind of did our thing in terms of creating that ecosystem. And throughout this journey of 10 years, we learned so much. We learned from various parts of the world. We learned with a lot of people that we thought that we should translate that into a business. And that's what we are now. We are a collaborative innovation consultancy with a global reach. And we have offices in Lisbon and in São Paulo. I'm responsible for the hub for Latin America, and we started that last year. And we also have a hub in Africa that we are developing, but we have programs and projects in 25 countries around the world that aim to promote not just the development of ecosystems, but also to use those ecosystems to solve the challenges of the societies, of corporates, of the governments, and of the various players that an ecosystem encompasses. So what we do, we do corporate open innovation, and I'm going to bring some examples of how these programs can actually help governments to become more digital. So I see this in two ways. I think I see this, looking back at what, our colleagues from Hong Kong and Bangladesh told us, which is a development of an ecosystem and becoming an ecosystem that actually can contribute to the economy and to contribute to, the interconnection with the rest of the world, but also how can this ecosystem support governments to become more digital, which is much more challenging or equally challenging. And that is extremely important, is how do you actually put this ecosystem serving the government to make the government more cost effective, to make the government closer to the society, to make the government reduce bureaucracy and red tape, and to make the government, digital, not just digital because it has a website or an app, but culturally digital, which I think is really challenging, especially for heavy institutions such as government and public entities. And we obviously continue with our experience, which become from our genesis, which is acceleration programs and support other countries. We do that a lot in Brazil and in Africa, support regions, cities to create ecosystems in their own spaces. So going back a bit to our mission, I think, this is very important. The challenges that we face around the world, those being in companies with business challenges, those being in governments with, more society challenges, or those being global, such as climate change or sustainable development, I think we strongly believe that the external ecosystem can really support solving some of these issues in a very innovative and faster way. And that's what we do. We actually match in the collaborative way startups, entrepreneurs, labs with the sort of the most conservative part of the equation, which are corporates, governments, cities, and societies as a whole. And we do that via methodologies that we've developed throughout these years, and via mainly open innovation, business innovation, and ecosystem acceleration. I'm going to give you some examples of open innovation, of some programs that we have done that have supported governments to develop some areas. Smart cities is a good example. We have been working with Lisbon for almost 7 years now, developing an open innovation program for developing a smart city. So making sure that Lisbon has the policies, has the tools to become a truly recognized smart city. And we do that via a methodology of open innovation, which means you identify the challenges. Why is Lisbon not a smart city already? What are the challenges that do not allow the city to become a smart city? And you then translate those challenges into a call, a global call to for startups, entrepreneurs, and others to try and come and solve those challenges, with their way of thinking and working. And that has been very interesting, because for the case of Lisbon and others that I'll bring some examples, we immediately recognize that it's not just the municipality of Lisbon that has a challenge in making sure that Lisbon is a smart city. There are a number of players around the city that need to be invited for this kind of reflection, to be able to translate in a better way what are the challenges that need to be solved. So for example, for Lisbon case, we had to bring the municipality, we had to bring the transport company, the water company, the energy company, the parking company, a technology company, all together collaborating and sharing their challenges in order to translate all those for the ecosystem to solve. And that's very important, and that's why we consider ourselves a collaborative innovation consultancy, because we strongly believe that if you want to tackle a challenge that is more than just a business challenge or a departmental challenge, you really need to bring other players on board to translate these in a wider way. So for Lisbon, we created this Smart Open Lisbon, which now has a different angle, because Lisbon is a green capital for Europe, and therefore we are more focusing on sustainable development. But we created a number of new tools and approaches that, year by year have allowed Lisbon to become more like a smart city. Another program was with tourism. Tourism, as you know, is quite important, and we are also doing something in São Paulo with tourism, because especially with COVID-19, tourism was probably the economic area more affected by it. And countries or cities or regions that are strongly dependent on tourism really needed to innovate very quickly and think differently on how am I going to solve this challenge, making sure that all the stakeholders that are connected with tourism area really cannot lose their business or lose their sites. So again, we use open innovation, we use the external ecosystem to solve those problems. And I'm a strong believer that the startup, obviously venture capital and investment is important, but the most important thing for a startup or for an entrepreneur is to have a client, is to have a customer. So it's very important that we connect those startups and this ecosystem with the ones that actually are going to buy their products and services. And we in InvestHK believe that open innovation is a way to do it. Obviously, going back now to ecosystem and specifically talking about GovTech, which is, something quite trendy at the moment. I think the UK was very good starting it off, which still continues. When the UK during Cameron's government David Cameron once asked, why don't we have startups working with us? Why are we not asking startups to come and solve our problems and to actually be our suppliers? And that was not possible at that time because the system was not ready for it, because it's quite bureaucratic, it's quite processes-based, and startups do not have the time or the money to invest in this sort of relationship. So it was really important to create almost a sandbox that allowed both government and startups to adapt in co-living and co-working together. And nowadays, the government digital service, which is, the sort of the umbrella of what the GovTech program is, really has been able to develop something really interesting. And if you are in London, I strongly recommend you to go to Whitechapel, where you see a huge hub, GovTech hub, solving that. But not just the UK. I mean, São Paulo is developing City, which is this huge area just for, not just for GovTech, but mainly focused on GovTech, where the São Paulo government really wants to have startups solving those problems. Now, the thing is, how do you make this link? How do you make this collaboration to work? And we strongly believe that you need a methodology, you need processes in place to make sure that the outcomes of it bring some impact, not just for government or for the public entities, but also for the startups, which really can see in this a way of growing, a way of developing their products and services. I have more examples. I mean, I'm not going to, to be very, to say much more. We do work in Africa as well, especially with the local government on developing a fintech hub, which again is very important when you have development banks, when you really want to renew your financial system, and making that renewal with the external ecosystem. And therefore is really fascinating how governments, despite of all the challenges that we face in working with governments, the opportunity that there is out there for us to support the ecosystems, when I say us, the external ecosystem, to support governments to become more digital and more agile, allowing almost a fusion between their challenges and what exists outside that can support them. I think I'll leave it there. Just to say, I mean, obviously we are a global consultancy, so we do interact very much with the ecosystems around the globe. That's something that we bring quite different. I mean, I would love to be more connected with Hong Kong and obviously Bangladesh, because we strongly believe, and that's part of the story in Portugal, that an open ecosystem is a more mature one. The more you open it, the more developed it becomes. And when I arrived in Brazil, despite of the fact Brazil is huge, and we do have a number of very interesting ecosystems in the south, in the north, and obviously São Paulo, where the most vibrant one is. But Brazil, because of its characteristics of a sort of protectionist country, it's very hard for you to have the Brazilian ecosystem open to other ecosystems in the world, as well as the other way around. So that's what we bring to Latin America. We really believe that the vibrant ecosystems that there are, not just in Brazil, but in Chile, Argentina, Peru, Mexico, if they are connected with the Bangladesh, with the Hong Kong, with the Portuguese and other European markets, they will become much stronger. And we together, in a collaborative way, we can solve the problems of the world, not just of the government, not just of the company, but really the ones that we are facing in our generation. So thank you very much, and I look forward to further discussions.
Thank you.
Superpowers.
Thank you, Renata. That was very informative. I mean, I think it's unique how you managed to integrate the platforms of government and private enterprise and provide this ecosystem, as you say, that brings different stakeholders together. And I think it's very necessary to do that. I mean, certainly in our own work, where we've helped map out, kind of 4 IR transformation blueprints, we realize that it's not something that government can do alone or private sector can do alone. It has to be something that is managed, where you bring in and incorporate the stakeholders from different parts of not just government and private sector, but overall society. At the end of the day, society should be served by this technological innovation. Okay, we actually do have a few more minutes since the next session after us is intermediated with a break. So Ricardo, you don't have to feel under any pressure to rush through anything. Take your time and inform us a bit about what your plan is for Europe and how EurA is sort of bringing their services into the market.
Okay, thank you very much, Asad. So I won't need my plan B script of rushing through my content. So I'm glad I have a little bit of extra time to share with you. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. Also to Dinis for inviting me. Asad, thank you for moderating. And Jayne, Tina, and Renata, thank you very much for your company and for the interesting insights that we will share. And looking forward also to debating further points that come along. So very briefly, my company, EurA AG, we're an innovation consultancy company, and we also work a lot on innovation ecosystems. And we started working a lot with German government. So we have developed over 50. We're 20 years experience in innovation consulting, and we've developed more than 50 innovation networks for the German government. And that's how we started. So I wouldn't say innovation ecosystem, we're taking about solving a very concrete problem. I mean, if we're looking about digitalization itself, we are able to focus very specifically. So we have, for example, an ecosystem that is now being created, for example, with the city of Munich, in cooperation with the city of Munich, which is more focused on serialized refurbishment of companies. And we use this to try also and upgrade the digitalization here. But we also have a network more in the north of Germany where we are developing autonomous vehicle technologies, and we're working together here with Frankfurt Airport, developing also AI digital technologies to help with cargo lifters, for example. So this is we're very, very diverse. I mean, we're also working together in medical, health, etc. I won't go into detail in all of them because I would leave up to my colleagues which have PhDs in the areas and are focused in more on these technologies. I will go mostly on the international projects outside of Germany in Europe, which is mostly my field of expertise. So EurA is now set up European-based. I am the managing director of EurA Portugal. We don't work a lot inside Portugal, though we could be hoping to change that. But this was something that personally I wanted to provide this opportunity. As Renata explained, some years ago, things weren't looking too hot. So the opportunity to actually create some employment there by taking their company, working on a European level, this was very, very interesting opportunity, which I couldn't say no to. What we work in general is, as I said before, innovation ecosystems on a regional level, but also on a pan-European level. And the innovation ecosystem, which I want to also talk a little bit about, is the one which I'm most proud of, which I'm heading as a contractor for the European Innovation Council. So the European Innovation Council, I think, will be one of the most interesting ecosystems in Europe in years to come. So this is my personal opinion. So I don't represent the council, but as a private contractor, we are actually implementing the business acceleration services. So in this sense, let me just say a few words about the program itself. So it's basically focused on getting deep tech companies and helping them accelerate the technologies into the market. I mean, the private funding that is put on in the program, I just get a couple of dates here. So the program itself has a requested funding of 15 billion over the next years. So each cutoff, we have around 4,200 applications from 48 countries. And it's also important here, the program also looks to diversity. So 20% of the CEOs are women-led. So this is also an important metric here. The portfolio itself, which we are managing at the moment, is 5,600 of some of the most innovative SMEs in Europe. After they enter the program, 17 enter in IPOs. And acquisition, so far, 43 of them have been acquired since 2015, 11 from the beginning of 2019, 2020. The investments are follow-on. So after the commission has invested, there is 5.3 billion so far that has been invested from 2 point something that's been invested so far. So it's actually a 2-to-1 ratio of private versus public investment. That's super interesting. And the companies, after they enter the portfolio, they have 40% growth, right? So this is pretty impressive portfolio that we're working with on a pan-European level. I would like to go a little bit in what we're actually doing as a service, right? So I think I'm very humbled that we actually have the opportunity to work in this ecosystem. And even for me, particularly when I was at the MIT, I had the opportunity to work for, or to provide some insights on a large oil and gas corporation, to also develop their innovation ecosystem. And I'm really happy that I'm actually able to work with, on a European level, on one of the largest innovation ecosystems in Europe, or the largest, if I can say my personal opinion on the matter. What the services we do, I mean, we have a very interesting portfolio, and basically we try and get private investment, wherever it may come from. And here, if you talk about business to business, you're normally talking about three kinds of stakeholders here. You're talking about large corporates, so we talk about the large corporates in Europe, we try and focus on those. We're talking about investors, so investors trying to get a stake in the business. And you also talk about public procurers, right? So public authorities also wanting to invest. These would be the three avenues which we try and help the SMEs grow. We are developing these three avenues. For example, we've had corporations with NASDAQ and with Euronext to try and gather late stage IPO investors into the program. We've also worked with European business angel networks, focusing more on the early stage seed investors. Okay, this will be from an investor point of view. With corporations, this is something that I find very, very interesting because it also has a nice success. Since the beginning of the program that we've been working with the EIC, we have set up corporations with 26 different corporates. Actually, more than 26. We have 26 different corporations, but we have had more corporates, and in total we've been able to put over 600 SMEs in touch with concrete decision owners. So what do we try and do here? That we try and do it a little bit differently, or try and add value. And it's very important to see if you're trying to work for an SME or trying to help work a portfolio of SME, here actually representing a region. It's important. What we want to do is go directly to business. So 3 months, 6 months, it's a very important time for a starter, for SME. I mean, in those 6 months, if they don't have a positive cash flow, they could die very, very quickly, right? And something that we see and we try and avoid, we don't see that all over the place, but we'll see a bit sometimes that depending on the quality of the corporate accelerator you're putting into contact with, if you have a corporate accelerator that's just for show, you have the risk of a company entering and they will be losing time because they could be very, very happily being strung along in an accelerator, but ideally you hear a no quickly and you can pivot and you can do something else. So the hardest thing for a company is hearing a maybe and being strung over 6 months. And sometimes I have meetings with these companies and it's, okay, so which corporates are you in contact with? And they say A, B, three big names. And okay, let's dig into that a little bit. Who are you talking to? Okay, it's some mid-level engineer. Okay, does anyone on those meetings have decision power to actually buy the technology from you or tell you if your technology is aligned with the corporate strategy? And if the answer is no, then okay, guys, maybe you have to sell yourself a little bit better or try or say no more times because there's the risk that you're wasting your time. You're wasting your time. Now, if you're looking for an investor, it could be very nice to have a PowerPoint slide where you have 3 corporates. They say we're in cooperation, we're in conversations with them. But then when the due diligence come along, that won't look as good. So moving back, what we try to do is when we're establishing a contact with a corporation, and here we have to think we're representing the region. So it's either on a government level or it can be a pan-European level. We try and make sure that we are put in contact with people who have first decision power over a proof of concept, that they say yes or no fairly quickly. And if it's a no, then that they receive feedback quite quickly. So let's say worst case scenario, the company, okay, had a meeting, had a trip, but at least they were able to validate with someone who can decide and say, okay, look, you can go in that direction. And this is key. And it's small, but it makes a huge difference. What we also try and do is when we're working with a large corporation or a group of large corporations, we try and group together these meetings. We did, for example, an event 2018 or 2019 with Electrolux, where we just took 12 companies. So we've had events with 150 with Procter & Gamble, for example. We just took 12 companies, but we insisted that they had meetings with decision makers, and we're able to have in total 80 meetings. So we have an average of 7 to 8 meetings per company with a different decision owner. So each one has own profit and loss, has their own decision power. And basically what we're allowing to do is with one trip, with one hotel, a CEO of a startup will have 7 business meetings to validate the product and get a concrete outcome out of that. Right? So it's simple, but we are able to do it because we are representing a portfolio of 5,400. So if we have one corporate that doesn't really play by the rules, and we've had that, most of them play by the rules, we can, not take the next steps. And this is when I'm hearing what Tina and what Jayne was saying, this is something that you can do with your ecosystem, right? Because you have a critical mass, and it's just a question of presenting it as a group opportunity, right? So this is very interesting. And then what we also do on there is we actually help them actually get ready, right? Because this, again, if you're talking about the region's brand, you also want to make sure, okay, if you work with a corporation, with a group of corporations, want to say, okay, we're going to work with you again, because your companies are top notch. And this we're able to deliver by the way we're working. So we are lucky to be working with one of the best or the best programs on European level. So we have good companies to start with, but through specific training, I mean, this is, again, it's simple stuff, but it's about choosing the right stuff. We're able to make sure that the program is also well seen. And we're very happy to have the feedback from the corporations that want to work again with us. Look, we're very happy with what you brought to us. We want to do this again. And this is a big difference between making something for show or actually having concrete deals come at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, these programs, this is what we want to do. So, I mean, I don't want to go into, I get a little bit excited, so I won't want to go in too much detail this. I know also the topic of this was also digitalization. So, digital, I'll just say that I think it's always associated with this, right? I mean, and we have, let's say on the micro level, we have different opportunities that we can focus on. I mean, for example, in COVID, we were able to do bring in over 70 procurers worldwide. So we to help our companies try and identify solutions for COVID-19, and we did this mid-April. And we had NHS, we had large corporates attending that. So that was a huge opportunity we were able to take advantage of and hopefully contribute towards a common goal here. I will also maybe discuss a little bit in terms of policy that the Europe is doing as part of it. I mean, we have lots of different investments that are going to come from the European Commission now. So resulting in digitalization. So we're talking about AI. We're going to see huge investments there. The whole infrastructure, that's also a huge program there. And of course, we're talking about the whole policy on data. It's going to be interesting to see how we have a couple of legislative actions that will take place before the end of the year. So it's going to be interesting what happens there. Regarding how this translates to our work regarding managing ecosystems, basically we have to try and identify what are the opportunities that are going to come, which are going to be many regarding digitalization. And this takes 2 forms. It, on one hand, affects the opportunities that we have. For example, we see a lot of the corporates that are working with us, they're focusing a lot on predictive maintenance technologies. This is something that in Europe, we know that is still very strong in terms of advanced manufacturing, right, in terms of AI. So we see that a lot. In our corporations with the ecosystem we're doing in Germany, we see a lot of focusing also on core technology manufacturing. And I won't go, and health also, that's also a big topic. I won't go into detail, we can leave it for discussion if you have any questions. But in view of the time, I think I've spoken for the promised 7 to 8 minutes. I would leave it up to the discussion. But again, I'm very, very excited to also hear how you're working on your ecosystems, because this is something that I'm very passionate about. And once you have, let's say, a structured approach and a common front, you can empower the companies just by joining them together, right? I mean, it is about the money, but it's also about how do I create guidelines and hold other corporations or other partners, I will call them partners, accountable to these partnerships. So I think this is something very, very interesting, and I'm happy to go more into depth with. Cool. Asad, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Ricardo. That was very cool. I mean, I think what came out definitely from that, from that introduction of what you do, is that you're so focused on the implementation part of it, which is very important. I mean, unless you can get the kind of like the sort of blueprint and the ideas into the market and actually implemented and taken up by the users, whether it's the enterprise users, SMEs, big corporates, that's really that's the secret sauce of how this powerful technology can be utilized in the marketplace. And we've had we've been working on things like that as well in Southeast Asia and Malaysia and South Asia. And I know that it's very, very difficult to do that. So it's cool that you have been able to, find some big customers and big industries like oil and gas and actually implemented this change. So we have had a panel of, 4 very interesting, eminent speakers. Most of the other sessions have had 3, which has given them a bit more time for Q&A type activity. But it was very interesting to hear from each of you. I think that we probably have a few minutes just for a final question. And to me, especially since we have such a global audience or such a global, kind of participant group over here, and at different levels of development. Jayne was mentioning, for example, how Hong Kong has emerged as a premium hub for implementing kind of, new digitalization platforms and companies. Tina was explaining how Bangladesh has focused on engendering local startups so that they can create change in an economy that is still developing and can perhaps leapfrog by some of that. Like Dcash example are great examples of how Bangladesh has created premium, globally competitive fintech players, for example, because the environment allowed them to leapfrog in that way. And in Latin America, in Europe, everyone's at a different set of the dial. I guess my question very simply, and any one of you can put your hand up and sort of jump into it, is that in such a wide area, of like digitalization, which encompasses every aspect of things, every industry, every way of doing things, I think it's important that you have to look at where your economy is at the level of development and, the tools that you have available to you, intellectual capital, physical capital, and pick the sweet spots for you to operate in. And I imagine those sweet spots would be very different in Brazil, for example, and in Portugal or Europe, for example, in Hong Kong and in Bangladesh. Would anyone want to comment on like which areas you've kind of really focused on, because that's where you have an axe, so to speak?
I could comment maybe from the experience that we have at our company. So as mentioned, at EurA, we have several ecosystems and innovation networks that we create, and it's a lot opportunity driven, but also what the government finds interesting. What in Germany, for example, we focus a lot on energy. We have a lot of innovation ecosystems focusing on problems with energy. Industry 4.0, I think this is where you have a large component of digitalization to also relate to the topic. And I mean, health is definitely something that is also related. I mean, not only telehealth aspects, but also how you can use AR, for example, in the question of health. So this is what EurA does with the ecosystems that we manage from Germany. On the European level, the larger ecosystem that we manage, the portfolio is very diverse here. So we have energy, health are also, again, hot topics. What we find is more transversal and more horizontal, especially when we're talking about operations, is anything related to IT. One thing that's interesting, fintech, although our portfolio is not very large, we see that the companies are very dynamic there in getting contact. So that would be, I don't know if that answered your question, Asad.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, a market like Europe, Germany, deep tech is something that Germany, has a competitive advantage in. That's why you see a lot of it coming out from there. Big industries, large industrial companies like oil and gas, again, make sense over there. I imagine, Jayne, in Hong Kong, it would be more, AI and things that China is really kind of, taking a big lead into. Is that correct?
It is, and actually, it's a really pertinent question, Asad, because I am constantly doing this. I think every year, there's a team of us that really look at the state of the ecosystem, where we are, and really think like, how can we play to our strengths? But in addition to how do we play to our strengths, we also have to look at circumstantially what's happening around the region, because we are very much, at a regional location, a regional, whether we're talking about regional head offices or other kind of representation. So we really have to keep on top of what makes sense for us to develop at any given time. It's not something that's static. You can't come up with a blueprint and then say, okay, for the next 5-6 years, I'm going to be executing on that. I mean, things are changing so quickly. COVID, classic example, the kind of things that we're seeing now. So even though Hong Kong was already, playing to the e-commerce market in China, because I mentioned before, it's the biggest market in the world, things just went absolutely crazy, during this whole COVID thing, and not just in China, but surrounding us as well. So, Hong Kong, already a traditional kind of trading hub, you can really leverage that. You've got talent, you've got expertise, you've got systems in place, you've got logistics, you've got a port business. So it's a case of just thinking, okay, how can I actually direct that kind of activity going on? Obviously, we can't dictate what's going to happen in the market, but you can certainly decide that, okay, how can we actually promote this a little bit more? How can we attract founders and entrepreneurs that are really doing well in those kind of areas to come and make Hong Kong their home, to access those kind of Asian markets? And it's constantly that kind of shift and dynamic that we're looking at. The one non-brainer for us is fintech, because we do have the world's the majority of the world's kind of financial institutions represented here. It's a massive B2B kind of market here in financial services. So even on the fintech side, it really plays to that B2B side as well. So, it is something you've got to be constant person of. The AI is a classic, as you say, and in China, some of the tech companies have more people in AI. Ping An, for example, one of the insurance kind of technology companies in mainland China, and one of the biggest, has something like 90,000 people deployed in AI. I mean, the kind of scale we're talking about is just phenomenal when you're talking about these big, huge markets, and you've got to play to our strengths. And for us, we can't ignore the fact that we are this independent and to a certain extent kind of free kind of jurisdiction right on the doorstep of mainland China and to other ASEAN cities. It's something that we've got to, get out there, get that message across, but also to try and attract those mainland Chinese kind of entrepreneurs and founders to leverage Hong Kong as well to go international. So, the fintech, the AIs, definitely areas that we're, very much prioritizing on, and the GovTech is definitely something that we're looking at big time as well.
Well, fintech is a big category, but I think we might have run out of time on this thing. I did want to ask Tina a question on Bangladesh in particular, because they have a lot of the developing markets have been able to leapfrog, especially with their kind of last mile mobile payment services and other kind of digital wallet services, and they've kind of created a cashless economy a lot faster than some of the more established economies, just because they needed to, right? We've seen this before in the whole mobile space where people couldn't get fixed lines, they went straight to mobile, and I think we're seeing those opportunities as well. We do know, of course, in Bangladesh, Tina, that some of your companies there have emerged as sort of regional leaders in the space. In India, of course, we've seen the same with Paytm and companies like that. So I guess that's an area that you're focusing on as well, Tina, in Bangladesh, fintech.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll be very very brief because we are running out of time. Wanted to kind of respond to that. For Bangladesh, the best thing is that density dividend, right? So so that makes doing business, the cost of doing business a lot less, and also you have the highest density of clients. So talking about mobile financial services, So in 2019, just sharing the data with you, number of MFS users was about 80 million and end of 2019. But right after COVID, that is middle of the year, it's about 89 million. So like a 10 million jump, just because we had to figure out ways to pay wages to the RMG workers, right? Wages to all these the utility payments. So there is a lot of the mobile, the MFS services that got a huge boost, and a lot of bKash accounts got opened. Nogod is another MFS provider, Rocket. So all three of them, these are the big ones. bKash obviously is the largest, but there's a huge boost in user services. And so what happened is that this COVID gave us this opportunity, kind of forced us to use technology. So people who were not very comfortable, or they were antsy about using bKash or mobile financial wallet, they had to use it. And what has happened that they have become used to it, because it's actually a lot easier. So with that comes into one of our project, which is the IDTP, Interoperable Digital Transaction Platform. And what it's doing is it's actually making all the mobile wallets, all the vendors, even as simple as the FMCG, those stores, small stores, shop fronts in the villages. We are going to bring all of them in this platform, which is going to be, we are developing it from the ICT ministry. And that is, think about what impact it will have. The day laborers, the RMG workers, especially the women, they will, first of all, there is going to be low cost. It's a low cost transaction, a lot lower than the usual wallets out there. But there is going to be they will have their credit history, right? Because they're going to do everything through this wallet. Or from this platform. So on the user side, that's a huge impact. And on the other side, it's going to be very easy for these small shop fronts to get payments from their customers, because a lot of them do businesses and sell goods on credit, especially the FMCG stores. So that is going to be an area of huge proliferation and big development, the fintech area. The other one is health tech, and especially
let me just cut you off over there for a sec, because I know that we're hitting the limit of our time here, probably over it actually. But I'm glad you got that in there, because the key word there that you said, the interoperability of the platforms, the conventional platforms and the new digital platform. I think that's an extremely powerful concept, especially for developing economies. I would encourage all of our participants on this call to socialize with each other and share some ideas further beyond today's format. It was good that we were able to have this discussion. I hope the rest of the audience and participants also enjoyed it. I thank you very much for your time, and I think with that we can hand it back to the organizers. There is a break, but I think it ends in 5 minutes. So sorry to the audience for using up your coffee time or your gin and tonic time or whatever it is, whichever part of the world you are in right now. But thanks for your participation. And